depending on who's handling the raga. That cannot be forgotten. Gender also plays a huge role. So raga can say a lot, but I think it cannot if the artists don't want it to. If you don't want it to, if you just want it to be pleasing, and of course it's beautiful and you're going to love it and I love it too, then it will not say much.
When you speak about music, there is a dominant strain. No matter how much you try to subvert it, there was nevertheless a dominant strain. There are also residual elements as far as music is concerned, if for that matter any art form is concerned. But you're also, I think, in the last decade or so, you're also trying to take it forward as an emergent, maybe as an emergent art form. So in that sense, how much of sustenance do you draw from an earlier tradition of resistance? Because I'm sure such traditions of resistance must have been there within the Carnatic music tradition.
Well, there's always been resistance, and different kinds of resistance. I think the whole Devadasi's music and life was, in retrospect, a form of resistance. The Nadaswaram was resistance. Especially at the time of the cusp when the change happened, you can see the resistance in the discourse, you can see the resistance in the performance, you can see it all. So there is a long history of resistance. But if you go to about 150 years from what we have, we don't have enough information of resistance. Tyagaraja resisted, yes, in his own way, but within a certain spectrum that was acceptable. So that was resistance. Dikshitar also resisted, in the way if he involved himself in what was basically light folk Scottish and Irish tunes. That's a form of resistance too. Therefore, I think we all draw from that. I think I draw from two things. One is there this strain that I carry forward called music at all? And I do believe there is something to that. I don't believe there's anything emerging from nowhere. No. And two, these questions that have been generated by these multiple artists and musicians in the past are the triggers for my questions. Nothing I'm saying today is new. I am an utterly unoriginal human being. And I have no problem saying it. I don't need to be original. Why should I be original? I'm utterly unoriginal. And that's the greatest inspiration, that I'm utterly unoriginal. Because I have all these streaks and these streams and these words and these phrases and these songs and these ragas and these talas. All I do is listen and watch. That's all I do. To my best abilities, I listen and I watch. And therefore, it's the unoriginality of my mind that allows me, and the originality of the minds that came before me. And I'm not being humble. I'm the last person in the world who's humble. Okay? So I'm just telling you the truth here. This is the reality. This is the reality. And therefore, yes, I do draw. And very proudly.
You have stormed the bastions of caste, of gender, of Carnatic music. I think it was in 2016 that you held a concert in Bangalore along with 5 Jogappas. It was a very interesting, for me, a lay woman as far as music is concerned, it was a very interesting experiment, because here are these transgender people who are singing their songs along with what you believe in is a high form of classical art. Now, what was also interesting was the way the ensemble was envisaged. There were gungaroos and all kinds of folk instruments. On the other, there were also the mridangam, the khaddam, and all those things. But then, we are also talking about a space which is unequal in its power relations. So what kind of conversations were you able to engender? And how did this consciousness about the inequality of power that existed in that space make you, in a certain sense, vigilant about what you were doing?
This is something I think I'm still struggling with, and I don't believe in my lifetime I'm going to figure it out. First, I want to say that when this whole possibility of working with the Jogopas came, it came through various friends, and specifically one friend who works with them, and the idea was, can we make music together? And instinctively I said yes without having heard their music. And then we started this conversation. I've said the story. I must tell you the story of where I met the Jogopas first. I was in IIM Bangalore for a lecture, and our first rehearsal was in IIM Bangalore. I think that itself was a subversive act. 10 Jogopas coming into the campus of IIM Bangalore, and if anybody, how many of you people here have gone to that campus, I don't know. There can't be a more casteist, more elitist campus than IIM Bangalore, or any IIMs for that matter, or IITs too. You can add them to the list. And I remember the whole interaction. For me, I honestly, I was very uncomfortable. My only interaction with transgenders was at street corners, or in the railway station, or in the railway train. Therefore, it was, I think I was learning, and I still continue to learn. But as far as Siddhama was concerned, or Bibijan was considered, or Rakhi, all of them, they were just having fun, and we were going to sing. And they sing with a kind of an abandon that I still seek. I don't have it. And the session won't stop. We just keep singing and we exchange. Ye gaenge, wo gaenge, ye nahi gaenge. We'll sing that, we will sing this, what we do. And through the process, I must tell you at that point of time, though, there is always this utopian feeling when you start something like this, right? You believe that you're, and you also believe that there is some agency here and there's some conversation. But thankfully, I didn't fall in love with it. And then very soon you realize that, it's a beautiful relationship you're building. There is equality, but there's also inequality. There's inequality in everything, from their perception of me, my perception of what we are doing through this. So we talked about this, we challenged it. One of the things we said is the way we sit will be changed. We will not sit in a fashion that shows any kind of differences. All this happens, yet it is unequal. And that's the whole challenge of such an interaction. How does one keep that interaction on, constantly aware of the complexity of the interaction and the ugliness that is built in our differences? But some of my critics on the other side of the spectrum said, a Savarna doesn't have a job here. A Brahmin, what does he think he's doing? I completely disagree with that discourse. I believe there needs to be the problematization, and I'll problematize myself. But that critic is also important for me. So it's every time we perform, or every time we come for a discussion, these thoughts are always there. What can we do to subvert ourselves? What can we do to create a context where there is conflict? There has to be contestation in art. Without contestation, it is deadpan boring.
I thought it was very interesting, you singing Muthuswami Dikshidhar along with the Jogopas.
Or there's a song that we sang completely with the rhythmic accompaniment of the Jogopas. Little things you can do, little things you can come in and go out. And we're still learning in the process. We're still learning the process. There's another interaction that we've been doing for a year is between Kuthu, as in Tamil Nadu they call it either Terukuthu or Kattai Kuthu. And we call it the Carnatic Kuthu. And that's again the whole idea of Kuthu is a storytelling, theatrical tradition. And we have Carnatic, my wife Sangeeta Shivkumar is also a musician, we sing, we provide vocals for it. But again, we come in and go out, create contests, create contradictions, so the idea is how can you do it? And in that we do something interesting. Rajagopal, who is the Kuthu artist, one of the most senior artists in the country. And we created this interlude where we said, we will have a conversation through music on 4 themes: caste, language, form, and there's one more. I'm slipping me. Okay, one more. And the whole idea is we present the conflict that inherently exists between Rajagopal and me and our aesthetic worldviews through that conversation. So I create the arrogance there, create the questioning there, create the issues there. So these are the ways you can actually problematize it. And I do believe that everybody needs to problematize it. And I concede there are days I fall on my face, I'm going to make major mistakes. But I have to get up and continue trying.
The reason why I asked you that question was when I looked at this concert and I listened to it on YouTube, I thought the Jogopas were perfectly relaxed. They were enjoying it.
You saw the first concert, you can imagine how tense I was.
Yeah, you were very, very tense as far as I could notice. And that's the reason why I asked you that question. Because
and also the relationship has grown. Yes. We've been now together for 2 years. It's very different. It takes it, and I agree that the problem is more with me. And I recognize that very early, that I was unlearning myself. Whether I learned anything, I unlearned a lot of things. And I continue to unlearn a lot of things.
That takes me to the next question about the Chennai Puramboku Padal. It's very interesting again for someone like me to watch it. For many of us here in Kerala, we really enjoyed it. The way you mapped on environmental concerns onto Carnatic music. But what was also interesting as far as that experiment was concerned was the way, like in an alapana, where you have an exposition of a raga, you also took up the word Puramboka and took it to its different meanings, took it to its different possibilities. What was the greatest challenge you faced in singing this?
Actually, singing Puramboka was the easiest thing that happened in my life. I thought it would be a very difficult thing. It was not. So I've said this story, I'll say it again. First time when the Puramboka idea came, it was sent by my dear friend and environmental activist Nityanand Jairam. And even before that, I had in a public event made the statement that I realized suddenly that it's not just the content of what you sing, it's also the dialect of what you sing that changes perception of the content. It never struck me before that event. Somehow it happened to me. So a man in the audience, a very senior man, got up very angry with that statement. He said, "Are you saying you're going to sing Carnatic music in Chennai Tamil?" And instinctively I had to, politically you have to say, of course, and I said it. I mean, how can you be caught wrong on the wrong foot on a political question like this on stage? I said, of course you can sing. But then I realized that, okay, politically, it sounds very good, but aesthetically will it work? I had never worked it out. And sometimes certain things may not just work out aesthetically. You must come to accept that the political and aesthetic just don't work. You have to figure out a different aesthetic conversation to the politics. Around that time is when this song came to me. I saw the song and I just instinctively felt it'll work. It's the first rock song that has been made into a Carnatic song. I think that's its greatest celebration actually. It's a Tamil rock song. You can watch the rock version on YouTube. It's there. And I did one more thing subversive there. I could have tuned it. I decided that I will not tune it. I'll hand it over to a very dear friend of mine who is probably the epitome of what the Brahminical identity is. He's a very dear friend of mine. And I said, you tune it. He said, why? I said, one, you tune very well, but there's a second reason for it, which I won't tell you. And he took the song, and within 2 hours the song was ready. We sat together, we jammed, and we got it ready. And it worked so beautifully, and I was very surprised that it worked with so much ease. There was also a learning that happened in terms of aesthetics that happened there, that I think there's a lot to carry over from it. And so you had a Puramboka song on an environmental issue, retrieving a word which is an abuse. In Tamil, Puramboka is an abuse. Poda Puramboka is something every auto driver will tell you. If you don't give him the money, he asks you. And if he's not told you that, then you probably didn't understand or you paid him too much. One of the two has happened. And every cinema has that word. So I think it's the first time that a contemporary abuse word is being sung in Carnatic music. I think that's a great throw. Because bad language itself is a very important part of artistic discourse. If you don't have bad language, you don't have society. That's the truth. I mean, if there's no bad language, what we are doing here? And imagine bad language in so-called high art. Fabulous. You should bring it out there. So it was actually the easiest thing. I discovered another thing. I thought Puramboka will get great resistance. Total failure. There was no resistance. So this baffled me. Then I figured what the problem is. This environment is always a very comfortable thing for all upper caste human beings. No plastic. Very good. We'll all say no plastic. Okay? We are all very happy saying no plastic. But we won't ask, where is my trash going? Where is it being thrown? Who lives around that community? What is the caste of the community who's bearing the stench of my nonsense? That we will never ask. So I realized that environmental activism actually is the best way to sell things towards the upper classes of any society. This was a discovery I realized. But suppose, I'll tell you, but that song had one problem. If that song had somewhere brought caste as a word, I can tell you there would have been a hangama like nobody's business. But there was a line in that created a problem, which was a line which had "Make in India." And that's it. You're making an environmental song. You're attacking the Modi government. How can you attack the Modi government as if there's been no environmental? So by the time we explain to people that Make in India is a metaphor, it's a contemporary metaphor. It doesn't mean that everything in India has been beautiful before. And the contemporary metaphor is that Make in India is a fraud. And you have to call out a fraud. I mean, how can you not call out a fraud? So I'm just saying it, that is also interesting that we realize that how environmental activism is actually such an easy way for people of privilege to feel they're contributing to society. And environmental activism limited to plastic bottle, segregating trash, those kind of environmental activism. Beyond that, it's a problem. You can't go. So there's a lot of learning from it. And musically, it's grown. There's another thing. One is, see, I'm also cultured to sing a Tyagaraja Kirtana. I'm trained to feel through a Tyagaraja. It's fascinating. I may not believe in anything Tyagaraja said, okay? But I am trained to feel through Tyagaraja. That's all, I can't explain it. I may not even understand the meaning, but I feel through that word. The consonant, the vowel, the aesthetic forms are subconsciously in me. I know how the word will be formed. I know how Dikshita's words will be formed. So I feel through it. This was new territory. How do I feel through Porambokku Onakku Illa Enakku Illa? I've never felt through it. And I can tell you, it took me, even after the production of that video, I sing it in concerts. In fact, in Kerala, I can't sing a concert without singing it. Everywhere in Kerala, I go, Porambokku Padal is a request. And I can tell you, it took me 6 months to feel the song. And I don't mean it politically and socially. I mean as an artist. Aesthetically, for the sound to be felt in every movement that I do, it took me 6 months. So there was a learning there too.
That takes me to my next question. You have also had kacheris where you mapped Ambedkarite ideologies onto, What I was particularly interested was, say for example, you included Subramanya Bharati. What kind of curating did you do? I mean, what kind of selection of songs and composition?
So one is Bharati has always been, to a large extent, part of the Carnatic repertoire. But I have tried moving a little away, away from just Subramanya Bharati because he's very convenient. There again, he's incredible, but he's very politically convenient. So one has to be careful. But for example, I brought in a song that's directly challenging caste by Bharati Dasan, who was a very important person of the whole Dravidian movement. Those kind of things have been very consciously curated. Even if I'm singing a lot of Basava now, I've started singing a lot of Basava into my concerts. All that is very consciously curated. Perumal Murugan, that whole relationship that Murugan and I have developed over the last couple of years is very conscious, and Murugan and I are very conscious about why we are doing what we are doing. We discuss on what kind of songs we want to create. In fact, there's a song that we created, I don't know if you remember that the statues of Lenin were demolished in Manipur or somewhere, and then Periyar in Tamil Nadu, and I was at the Kochi Lit Fest, and Murugan was there. And I made a statement in my session when I said it's not just about politics. This is a destruction of an artist's work. And I said there is also a problem in our perception of people who make statues for political leaders you see on the road. Nobody asks who made that statue. Nobody even considers the person who made that statue an artist. All of us sitting here are culpable. I'm sure there are hundreds of statues on the road here. We don't know who it is. But if it's in a gallery where you showcase some complicated name or does something, then we know who the name is. So I had raised this issue, and 2 days later, Murugan sent me a song. And we put that song out. So a lot of Murugan work is political. It is subversive. It has his dialect, which is very different from my dialect. It has his politics. It has a very rural sound, which we don't usually involve. So this is all consciously done, very consciously done, because I want Tyagaraja to turn around and look at Murugan. I want Murugan to turn around and look at Subramanya Bharati. I want Subramanya Bharati to look at Dikshit. You need all these things, and maybe you get more people, and I'm sure there are more creative artists than me who can even bring more interesting discourses in. But you need to create these contra-indicators. Every great piece of art, literary or otherwise, or visual, always has contra-indications, where the highlight and the non-highlight are always playing with each other. And you keep changing the spotlight. That's great art. And it'll fade, it spots here and goes. And in that magic, in that shadowness that happens between all this is where art resides.
Wonderful. That takes me to the next question. For many of us, especially for the average listener of music, song means film songs. As a trained classical singer, how do you explain the fascination that we have for the musical? Say, for example, the musical as a genre disappears in other parts of the world, but it continues to evoke a lot of interest, and we are so passionate about the musical. To what do you explain?
I think culturally, it comes from our theatre traditions. Our theatre traditions have never been non-musical. They always had music and dance. So the music and dance you see in cinema is just a continuation of an old tradition that you see across this country. Across this country, theatre always had the song, always had the dance. So when new technology arrived, if you look at, say, the Tamil film industry, the film industry in India, when cinema came in, the first thing cinema did was in search for music. What is the music that was acceptable, were easily part of the people who were making cinema, who were the upper crust of society, was Carnatic music or Hindustani music, in the case of the North, right? So immediately Carnatic music becomes a very dominant factor. Now they've not figured out acting as yet. So you have these horrible actors who are great singers, acting in all these films because they sing well. So therefore this whole idea of music being integral to the cinematic expression is a cultural thing, and I think that's something quite magnificent. And that automatically has a greater reach. And therefore this fascination for cinema music is but natural in our culture. I'm not even surprised by it. But what is more interesting is how has the sound of cinema changed? And I find most interesting part to think about. If you take Tamil cinema, the Dravidian movement distinctly changed the sound of cinema. The sound of cinema, because it's a couple of things: storyline, social context. The stories that you started telling were different. Then the sound had to change. If you're bringing in more urban, then you're bringing caste, you were bringing discrimination, then different sounds had to come in. So through a period of time, you have aspiration, you have social conflict, you have a different audience getting involved in this discourse, all changing the aesthetic of the sound. And slowly the Carnatic becoming an influencing but a very, very, very lesser partner in it, which I think was very important. And if you see the 80s, it's very interesting. You had a lot of Western direct influence, and that also came from economic, social aspiration. So, I mean, cinema music by itself is a discourse, and I think that's been most interesting. But there's been one question nobody has yet answered to for me, and I've asked this everybody, and I'll throw this question out. In 2018, if anybody is going to make a mythological film, even in 2018, I'll put a wager here, they'll still use classical music. My question, why? That's a very interesting thought. That why is it even in 2018, if I think God, if I think Ramayana, if I think Mahabharata or something, or if I think Ayyappa for that matter, it has to be some Carnatic raga that is appearing. Why can't it be local kooth that is completely part of the soundtrack? That is something that I think we all need to think about, because I think underlying there is a certain idea of religion and belief.
I think you have answered the question elsewhere.
Have I? Okay.
You have said that maybe film songs lack a certain kind of gravitas, and which is something that is attributed onto the classical Carnatic.
I don't think that's, if I've said that, I correct myself. I don't think it's true. I think film music.
It is believed that film songs.
Yeah, it's believed they don't have gravitas. And I think, but yeah, that's the whole idea thing. No, people don't forget that because cinema music is heard by a million people, it is considered more serious. It's never considered serious music. Respect and seriousness are very different from popularity and fame. Even today, respect will be given to me in a way only because I sing the classical form. In a way that a cinema singer will not get. And that is problematic. That you don't believe it's serious art. But you automatically presume that whatever rubbish I churn out for you is serious art. These things are something we have to think about.
Interestingly, if I ask you the question, how far do you think, quote unquote, the authenticity of a raga can be played out in a film song?
My question, why does it have an first of all, authenticity? I'm going to keep that.
That's why I said quote unquote.
Yeah, I mean, that word itself is so deeply laden with. I'm telling you, what authenticity with which do I sing the raga in a Carnatic concert? I don't know.
All the time, we are people who are more serious listeners are so bothered about teasing out the ragas in film songs.
Okay, that's a cultural habituation. That is pattern recognition that we'll all do. We know something, we use that pattern to recognize something else. If you know something else, you'll recognize something else. And that's what classical Carnatic listeners do. But I think that you don't need to have the raga as it is in a cinema genre at all. Why do you need to? You're imposing upon it an aesthetic that is unconnected to its. An aesthetic has got to do with intentionality. The intentionality of a song in a film, a good film and a good context is very different from me singing a raga here. Therefore, expecting that, even worse is, I'll tell you what, we respect a film director if the person is used to a lot of ragas. That is so condescending. The whole world of classical music does that. If that composer uses Western classical music and uses Carnatic or Hindustani music, then somehow the respect for that person increases. Why? What certification are you giving? It's nonsense. But we do that automatically. And I can tell you the other flip, the composer also knows. And the composer that's the whole idea of aspiration, right? Social aspiration. The aspiration is say, I want the certification of the classical. This is the problematic caste question. The battle between the condescension, the oppression, and between the aspiration. And that exactly same thing plays out in sound.
But then again, I would like to pose a question there. You have critiqued Ilayaraja, for example.
I was talking about him without mentioning his name, but you just put it out there.
No. This was in another context. Malayalis love Mari Mari Ninne in Sindhu Bhairavi. The way Ilayaraja, for example, took up that composition and transposed it onto Saramati from Kamboji. You have critiqued that, and what was very interesting for me as an academic was the way you critiqued it, because you said that it disintegrates the essence of the raga, which I find problematic, because isn't that precisely what you're talking about?
It disintegrates the aesthetic of the composition, not the raga. The essence of the composition. I'll tell you why. So, a lot of people have posed this problem in my discourse, and they said, you say this, but why are you critiquing him for that? Fundamentally, I felt that there was a certain opportunism that in Ilayaraja's motive. This is my opinion. Now, when you take, what is Mari Mari Ninne? It is not lyrics. It's an aesthetic body. It's an aesthetic body of raga, tala, lyric that is together, which has an oral tradition also. If it didn't have an oral tradition, it had only lyrics, then we won't have this conversation. So it is an aesthetic object or an art object. Now, the moment you remove any part of its elements, it disintegrates as an aesthetic object. And my problem with Ilayaraja doing that was he disintegrated the aesthetic object. And why did he disintegrate it? He disintegrated because he wanted to give himself authenticity in a film of saying it's a Tyagaraja Kirtana. That to me is deeply problematic. He wanted a Tyagaraja mudra, so everybody believes it's a Tyagaraja Kirtana, but he was not willing to give Tyagaraja's composition its aesthetic object respect that it deserved. To me, this is problematic. If you want to use that individual's entity in a context in a film, and the film's context is important here. The film's context was this person is performing a Carnatic music song on stage. So even the cinematic intentionality there plays a role. The intentionality is to show authenticity of Carnatic music, by the way. So here to me you're playing a certain
But isn't the aesthetic always already political in that sense?
Isn't the aesthetic
always already political?
Of course it is political. I'm not denying it. But I'm saying that I have a problem with this politics. That I believe this politics is a certain abuse of a different kind of power that I don't find comfortable. And I also feel that the politics of an aesthetic being, of the aesthetic art object, also needs to be looked into. Now, for example, if I want to create a Carnatic composition in a context like that, I could always write the lyrics. There's no problem. There are so many lyricists, you could have used it. Or you could have sung this composition as the aesthetic object it was and then subverted it by saying, why are you singing such Telugu songs? Carnatic musicians ourselves have done it. So in a way, he's not the only person to be held accountable. We are all accountable to it.
That takes me to the issue of piracy.
So what?
Piracy. So for example, in India, we have, as far as music goes, what I believe is the concept of commons. We have the Jatra. Yeah. We have the Jatra tradition, the Ram Leela tradition, the singing of Ramayanas. So there is a musical common that we have always already tapped into. No matter what we are doing, what kind of exercise we are doing, we have tapped into that idea of a certain kind of a communal repertoire of music, right? So when you take that to the age of liberalization and digitization, how does the idea of piracy work out?
Well, I've moved a lot in my ideas of it. There was a time where I was very upset about it. Intellectual copyright, performances recorded. But there are 2-3 sides to this. One is, I think the sharing is inherent. The porambokness of our being is what we should celebrate. I mean, we all should be poramboks. If we are not porambokas, then we are not citizens of this country. And so that's one side. And then the other side comes in is the question of livelihood. Now there it gets a bit complicated because recording industry is today dead. Okay? And recording was a stream of income. And in a niche kind of an art form, it becomes a very important component of the income flow. If you're mass, if you're like cinema or something, the dynamics are very different, right? And what happens there is a direct loss of a certain source of income for the artist. And I don't think today we can even call it piracy. It is sharing, right? So what always bothered me about sharing was not actually the financial thing, because I think I'm in a state where I don't necessarily worry so much about it. But the lack of acknowledgement or even asking the artist, can this be recorded? Can this be placed in public domain? I feel that is problematic. That's what bothers me. I've given that up even now, but I'm just telling you what bothers me. That the fact is that the artist's creation is not even looked at saying, can it be shared? I mean, does the artist have a right to say, share it or don't share it? I mean, do I have that right or not? I don't know. I believe that at some level there is that possibility. That's what bothered me for a long time. But now we can't even call it piracy. I mean, how can we call it piracy? Everybody has a cell phone. Everybody is recording and putting it online. And I don't even know whether it's piracy anymore. But I think there needs to be a different model worked out. I today have no problems with people putting it out there because I see that is the way it's going to be. And that's the way we're going to accept. There is a certain sharing. But the other question is everybody sharing or is somebody exploiting it? See, it's a very complicated mess for which I don't think there are any simple answers. But I do believe that it will be nice if at least the art maker or the art catalyst, not even maker, is at least asked whether it can be shared. I just think it makes, and nobody says no, I think it makes a huge difference.
That takes me to the recent controversy, your singing of Jesus and Allah. And so what is the function of art in the age of jingoist nationalism?
To tell them that jingoism is bollocks and put them in their place. Very simple. We live in ridiculous times. Such ridiculous times that who you pray to, what you sing, what you speak, and it's not about people disagreeing with you. I mean, it's the offensiveness and the vulgarity and the anger and the violence that we have come to accept as a way of protest. I mean, that's the most crazy thing. That people sometimes come and say, if you protest, doesn't the other person have? No, the other person is not protesting. He's threatening my life. He's threatening my family. He's telling me I have no right to be. That is not protest. And that's what's happening today. And in such a scenario, it is essential that people, citizens, not just artists, we keep saying artists should do, citizens of this country have to come out every day and say, I will pray to any God I want. Say the prayer loudly on the street. Because if we don't do this, we have to pose challenges to these people. I will sing on any God. I will also sing that I don't believe in any God. And I let that conflict play out in everybody's mind. I mean, it is essential that we do it. What I think has never happened in the recent past is the art forms that inhabit the very, very comfortable upper middle class, upper caste, upper elite world asking these questions. That is what makes people most uncomfortable. Because the so-called moral of the world is controlled entirely by the upper caste, middle and upper classes of this country. And that is why Carnatic music, Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi, Odishi, Hindustani music all fall into that category. They epitomize what we believe is Indian culture. And that is why I think a subversiveness in that, shall we say, conglomerate of
moral majority.
Yes, is very important and challenging. They are the ones who have a problem with me. They are the ones who are challenging. Because we have to break down this notion of Indian culture. It's a bogus notion. There is no Indian culture. There are multiple cultures in multiple villages. That's all there is. And we have to break it down. And to break it down, I think the role of people who belong to those cultures become essential. Because if you're outside those cultures, you're just seen as an outsider who's screaming. But if you're inside that, the explosion must happen from within.
Something like the organic intellectual, the organic musician, the organic artist. I think it's time that, I'm sure there are many people in the audience who would like to ask questions. Can we take a couple of questions from the audience?
I'm thankful for this opportunity. So, my question is something that's personal and that can be asked to any musician. You said that you are engaging with the subversive forms of art, with including the transgenders and all people who are marginalized, which is a very good thing. But my question is, even if you do all these things and plus with the high art forms, do you ever find that music as a noise? I mean, have you ever feel that, or do you ever feel that you get fed up with music at some point of time? Even when you do all these things, in the for a kind of type of a subverting music. Now, do you ever feel music as a noise? I mean, do you ever get fed up with music?
I get fed up with music. I hope not in this lifetime. Well, that's the only thing I know properly. First, I just want to just say one thing. I'm a little uncomfortable when somebody says that I've included transgender. No, I've not included anybody. I've included myself. Because it's a little. I know you didn't mean it that way, but I'm just using your word to explain something. That's all. I'm just using what you said. Because it makes me very, very uncomfortable when I say I'm not including. I'm just getting included. I'm the one who was sitting in an ivory tower who was not included. I didn't include myself, rather. So I'm including myself. Now, do I get fed up with music? Luckily, till 1:55 p.m. on the 11th of January 2019, I have not been. But what the future holds, we don't know. But there are days that there have been great frustrations. Not musically, but it's sometimes you do hit a wall. The noise and the sound and the abuse sometimes does get to your head. Sometimes you're telling, how can you not get what I'm saying? Sometimes it does get to you. But you just let it pass and you move on. That's all.
Yes, there's a question here.
Good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon.
My question is, so recently in an article, it was because it was saying that Dalits, when they're appointing for a very sacred position as such, it has a very counterpart of making a Dalit a Brahminical person or a Brahminical individual, which makes him much more of a socially exclusive in identity, which is critically having a negative impact on the identity politics as of now. So in a parallel situation, when I see the Sabrimala, which is having the most highlighting part of the era right now, it is when I see that the first people who say the solidarity towards women entering the temple was the Sangh Parivar itself. So my question is joining the two. Like, wasn't this the same what the Sangh Parivar wants? Wasn't this?
What was it? Which?
My question is very simple. Like
You're asking whether the Dalit priest happening is also convenient for the Sangh Parivar or something Sangh Parivar wants?
My question is, isn't the same agenda being used there? Is it not making the entire system Brahminical and being socially exclusive?
Very interesting question. On the first part, the reaction to that column that I wrote some time ago was this photograph of these 3 Dalit priests with a punal. And the moment I saw it, I first when I heard the news, I said, well, subversion of ritual is important. And then I saw the punal, I said, oh my God. Why does a person who needs to be a priest wear the thread? So, in fact, I believe ritual itself is a fascinating space for creating subversion if communities can come together. Imagine a temple where we create a mess out of ritual. You know, there are multiple rituals in multiple communities. Each have their own way of prayer. Imagine a temple where we can actually curate a prayer prayers and rituals that are mixing community identities. That to me is the most progressive thing that the Hindu religion can do ritual-wise. Then you have multiple discourses happening within that temple space. You could have a Malayalam ritual, you could have a ritual from an ex-caste, you could have it from the Brahmin, have everything. That did not happen, one. But here, the problem that the person had to become a Brahmin was in a certain signifying way. Now to the second question, I'll bring Sangh Parivar in, don't worry. The second question I think is texturally very different. Here it is the right of an individual to seek their deity, their belief, if they so wish, irrespective of who they are. Whether they are a woman who's 10 or 40, or transgenders who are 10 or 40, who are anybody. Now that is, I think, a fundamental constitutional right of faith to me. I see that slightly differently, okay? And now why does the Sangh Parivar actually want both? That is the interesting question we have to ask. Because that is why I had a problem with the first thing that happened. Because that played into the Sangh Parivar agenda of Brahminizing the whole idea of culture. If you want to challenge that, at the same time promote the fact that anybody can be a priest, then you need to question every structure within it about the priest. That was not done in the primary case. You did not question the identity of the priest. You presumed the identity and said, let Dalit become that identity. That's why that is challenging. Here you're not presuming any kind of identity. Here you're saying any person. Now the Sangh Parivar is trying to use that as progressiveness, only reason, or at least did at one point of time, to say that look at Muslims. This is all their stupid agenda is. That's all it was. Then they of course turned for other reasons. But their reason for backing it initially was completely communal on a different front. I don't think it was progressive at all in terms of trying to look at it as a reform movement. I don't think they ever will look at any of this in that category. That's my thought.
I think we are running out of time. Thank you so much.